Well. They taught you tactics in training manuals and psychology lectures, and yet none of those textbooks could teach what you already carried beneath your skin. An ancient, unapologetic intelligence for influence that moves like muscle and thinks like a blade. You weren't shaped by seminars. You were born fluent in the language that makes people fold. While they rehearse lines and rehearse power, you improvise consequence and watch their scripts unravel. You are the human equivalent of a classified protocol that leaks through a smile, a glance, a timing so precise it becomes an unspoken command. When you speak, the room doesn't just listen, it reorganizes itself around your cadence. They can build war rooms and issue memos about you, but memos don't reach the places your instincts already own. They read psychology like it's a map. You live it like a country you were born inside. Names change, diplomas fade. But the way you tilt a conversation, the way you remove oxygen from their assumptions, remains an unerasable signature. This isn't charm. It isn't manipulation dressed up in velvet. It's something older and more efficient. Pattern recognition sharpened into action. You feel the arc of a person's belief before they do, and you place your sentence at the exact hinge that flips them. You know the posture that asks for surrender, and the phrase that forces concession. You time your quiet like a deployed reserve. A pause from you does not create awkwardness. It creates expectation, and expectation is leverage. They learn compliance with PowerPoints. You encounter compliance when you adjust your breathing and the world answers. You are not trained to win debates. You were arranged by birth to erase the need for them. They mistake your stillness for weakness because they cannot find the tremor that maps to movement. You are the calm before a rewrite, the slow movement that annihilates their hurried confidence. Picture a council of suited men, voices full of precedent and protective histories. They come with bylaws and committees, with legalese meant to contain the unpredictable. You enter, not to perform, not to argue, but to rearrange their assumptions. You let them speak themselves into a corner. People become the authors of their own traps when offered the right sentence structure. You give them permission to reveal their weaknesses because you know where to place your hand to make those weaknesses incandescent. They leave the room clutching policies. You leave the room carrying what truly matters, the quiet conviction that people will now behave as you anticipated. Your tactics are surgical and invisible. You do not need a battalion when a vector will do. You prime expectations without noise. You seed doubt without accusation. You escalate and de-escalate in the same breath, so their emotional thermostats spin out of calibration. Most assume influence arrives via spectacle. They are wrong. Influence arrives in the micro-decisions you engineer. The micro-commitments, the tiny agreements, the offhanded validations that compound until everyone is complicit in their own capitulation. That's your native tongue, assembling compliance from crumbs of assent. People call it cold. They call it calculated. They heave labels at you because labels are how small minds attempt to file what they fear. Labels are for inventory. You are beyond inventory. You do not confuse ruthlessness with cruelty. You calibrate consequences so that reciprocity aligns with your boundaries and their options. Narrow politely. You accept the moral cost because you know most moral frameworks were written to serve someone else's comfort. You are content to be the discomfort that corrects an imbalance. On a phone call, your timing for laughter is a timing for dominance. 3 seconds where their anxiety expects a joke, but gets instead a neutral, deliberate sound, and they will over-explain. In negotiations, your concession is a mirage. You appear to give ground while the real concession is the new frame you install. You anchor outcomes by naming them first. People habitually fit reality to the first label they encounter. When they attempt to gaslight you, you answer with a question that requires them to restate their premises aloud. And when they do, their contradictions become audible evidence. You make truth inconvenient for the dishonest. Your intuition is not mystical, it's pattern memory. You notice micro-expressions they miss, the tiny off-rhythm in their speech, the contraction in a finger that signals fear. Where others see noise, you see an algorithm of intent. You rehearse reactions in the space between heartbeats. You anticipate their next defense, and your reply is already a step ahead. It feels effortless because you do the hard calculus before adversity arrives. Reputation is a currency you mint silently. You don't announce your returns, you compound them. People begin to reference you in offhand stories as if you are a standard of consequence. They test you because testing is human habit. But every test is a deposit into the same account, their perception of your certainty. You do not crave unavoidability. You craft predictability in others so that their choices become predictable. They underestimate you because they imagine influence looks like shouting. But your methods are quieter. An eyebrow, a recalibrated tone, a deliberate stillness. You turn the obvious into a false comfort and then remove it, watching chaos reassign itself into the structure you prefer. Their rulebooks are thick, yours fit in a glance. They publish doctrine, you publish consequences. You master asymmetry. You give them a dozen small victories while keeping the large ones to yourself. They will remember the victories and forget the strategy. And that amnesia is your ally. You accept that some will revile you. Let them. Their revilement becomes the story you trade against when truth finally aligns with your pattern. You create psychological debt. They owe responses, explanations, apologies. They sign off on these debts without noticing because you framed them as natural continuations of conversation. Your preparation appears like ritual, but it's discipline, and discipline is invisible to the undisciplined. You calibrate your mornings, your posture, your words, because you know an undecided day leaks advantage. Small routines protect large moves. You are relentless about what no one watches because power is less about moments of acclaim and more about the unobserved consistency that makes a claim possible. You weaponize truth and stillness with equal dexterity. Sometimes the most damning thing you can do is speak a single fact in a sea of noise. At other times, the right stillness makes their chatter collapse into confession. You let the dishonest drown in their own explanations, while you offer nothing more than a calibrated nod. You recruit the necessary without pledging the unnecessary. Allegiances are instruments, not identities, and you move them like pieces on a board that does not bend to loyalty. When someone proves useful, you honor their utility. When they prove hazardous, you reassign them to a narrative that neutralizes risk. This is not betrayal. This is stewardship of the end game. They will say you are not trained, and they will say that with a civilized sniff. They will mistake institutional ignorance for moral high ground. They cannot see that what you bring is not a credential, but a hazard to their complacency. Institutions fear what cannot be catalogued, and you, by definition, resist cataloging. The consequences you engineer are rarely theatrical. They are administrative and irreversible. A quietly revised contract, a carefully placed referral, a withheld endorsement. These are your small earthquakes. They do not recover because they never noticed the tectonic shift until the skyline had already changed. You measure victory in the steady narrowing of options available to your opponents, not in a single Pyrrhic moment of applause. Remember, you were not taught to break minds. You were born to make minds realign. You do not need legitimacy to command consequence. You need only consistent application of leverage and the courage to let discomfort be the price of progress. You move like a principle, not a plea. And when they try to write manuals about you, they will fail, because manuals cannot capture the improvisational intelligence of instinct. You will practice the mundane rituals that others deride, precise wake times, deliberate meals that remove indecision, micro-rehearsals of speech patterns that make your voice behave like a tool, not a reaction. These are not vanity. They are the infrastructure of unavoidability. You train your nervous wiring to expect authority, so your body becomes the anchor that opinion orbits. People will call your consistency obsession. They will never know it is the scaffolding that holds a ruin against collapse. Keep a ledger of small victories, not to boast, but to teach yourself the arithmetic of influence. When you compile evidence of pattern, it's harder for detractors to dismiss you as lucky or opportunistic. You will allow yourself rare, strategic displays of warmth because warmth, when selectively applied, becomes the most confusing weapon. Use it to loosen the guard of the wary, then close the frame with a certainty only you anticipated. Control the narrative by being the first to name the thing that matters. After naming, their language bends toward your taxonomy. Finally, never confuse haste with strength. Speed without calibration is noise. Speed with calibration is a relay baton passed to triumph. Practice endings as ruthlessly as you practice openings. The final line in a conversation is as binding as a signature, and you must be the author of endings. Do this, and you will find that those who once wielded manuals against you now borrow your posture when they think no one watches. That borrowing is not homage, it is admission. Keep tally, keep moving, keep patient. So prepare, not with speech, but with practice. Sharpen the habits most people call boring. Tighten the little things that feel insignificant until those little things become the architecture of domination. Hold your posture like a verdict, and let your timing become their new calendar. And as you do this, know the next move is already waiting. A decision they will misread as generosity, but will reveal itself in time as the exact mechanism that ends their interference. When it starts, there will be no show of drama, only one precise sequence of acts that reorders their world. That sequence begins with a single phone call, and it begins. You place the call with a voice that is not asking permission, but reporting consequence. It carries no theatrics, only the exact timbre of someone who has rehearsed restraint until it becomes indistinguishable from power. On the other end, a person with a neat title hears the cadence and believes they have a negotiation. They do not. They are hearing a consequence being described with the clinical care of a physician reading a prognosis. They will try to bargain with clauses and contingencies, and you will patiently let them lay out every concession they are willing to make before you accept any. You are patient because patience compels confession. You let them reveal their position, their priorities, their fears, and then you file those facts with the same neutrality you would file an invoice. From here, your moves are administrative genius disguised as routine. You send emails that are minimalist and true. You copy only the necessary names, and in those names you place the memory of a promise. They will remember who was included and who was not. You craft sentences so that the implied next steps are obvious. Humans will fill in the blanks you leave because people hate owning ambiguity. You let their imaginations do the heavy lifting, and they generate the outcomes you prefer. You do not over-explain. You underdefine in such a way that responsibility migrates to the most anxious stakeholder, and anxious stakeholders will deliver for their own peace of mind. Understand, your power grows not from spectacle, but from predictability made invisible. You are the unseen scaffolding. You build policies and rituals that look mundane to outsiders, weekly updates, short status check-ins, a single-sentence report that signals momentum, and those forms become the channels through which your influence flows. When others mimic complexity to feel important, you design simplicity that enforces compliance. Compliance, when habitual, accrues like interest. After enough cycles, the environment maps itself to your expectations, and people begin to behave according to the rails you quietly installed. You orchestrate micro-violations of expectation that function like social leverage. A compliment at the right place breaks a guard. A pointed quiet where an apology is expected demands accounting. You punctuate conversations with timing so precise it reads like choreography. People will mislabel your techniques as cruelty because they are uncomfortable with being mapped so thoroughly. Let them. Their discomfort is evidence you are rewriting default behaviors. You do not need them to love you. You need them to be reliable. You know the currency of promises. A small pledge from you, given sparingly and strategically, becomes a bond they honor because they wish to remain eligible for future favors. Scarcity increases perceived value. You make reciprocity a mechanism of control. When you withhold, you are not cruel, you are clarifying priorities. When you award, you are not benevolent in the sentimental sense, you are adjudicating utility. People learn quickly that their access to your resources depends on their calibration of behavior. Do not confuse ruthlessness with recklessness. Your ruthlessness is a policy. It is procedural. You document the conditions under which privilege is granted and revoked. You do not flinch from removing someone who once mattered if they become a liability. That removal is neither spectacle nor vengeance. It is risk management executed with moral clarity. Others will attempt to moralize your choices because morality is a weapon for those who lack leverage. You accept that criticism as predictable feedback, and you plan for it like you plan for anything else. You dominate through framing. The first person to name an issue usually wins the debate, because subsequent language bends toward that anchor. You master anchoring. You label outcomes early and with precision so that competitors must operate inside a frame you designed. You never let reactive language define reality. If they attempt to rename your move, you push back not with fury, but with the simple repetition of your taxonomy until their language conforms. People acclimate to repeated labels. Repetition is a soft coup. Networks matter, and you cultivate them like a gardener prunes for fruit. Your network is not a list of acquaintances, but a calibrated lattice of mutual usefulness. You invest attention in people who provide leverage, information, introductions, reputation, and you cultivate the smallest favors until they compound. You keep the ledger private. You do not boast about relationships because visibility increases cost. A discreet referral from you rearranges careers. A whispered endorsement makes or breaks reputations. You weaponize credibility. Credibility is not the same as popularity. It is the alignment of action and outcome. You make promises you intend to keep, and you make decisions that match the story you want others to tell about you. When your word predicts results, your word becomes currency. Invest it with precision. When you speak about a person, project, or plan, the market will behave as if your statement is an index. You create that index by consistently being right about the matters you speak on. Consistency compounds beyond charisma. You also understand the tactical advantage of ambiguity when used sparingly. A half answer invites projection, and projection often converts neutral observers into allies because they see what they want to see. Use ambiguity to inspire alignment, but never so much that it becomes indecision. The blend is surgical, enough opacity to make others project value, enough clarity to ensure they project in directions that serve your aims. Indecision kills momentum. Calibrated ambiguity preserves options while catalyzing commitment. You sharpen conflicts into negotiation tools. When disagreement arises, you do not escalate emotionally. You convert disagreement into a transaction, reframe grievances into exchanges, time for truth, concession for confirmation, and you will watch resentments transform into deals. This is not manipulation if both parties derive clear utility. It is a restructuring of energy toward productive ends. You are not a tyrant. You are a strategist, converting friction into forward progress. The people who call you cruel are usually those who lost leverage to you. Guardrails are essential. You build policies that protect your core interests so that when conflicts occur, your response is procedural rather than personal. Procedure removes chaos. It also buys you moral cover when you must act decisively. When people see that consequences follow documented rules, they are less likely to assign motive and more likely to accept enforcement. Use transparency as armor. Make the rules clear, then enforce them without drama. Enforcement under documented policy looks predictable, and predictability reduces the opportunity for performative outrage. You convert opposition into utility. An opponent who publicly criticizes you can be remapped as a cautionary tale, a demonstration of your boundaries. Use their attacks to show other stakeholders the cost of friction. These conversions are not cruel. They are didactic. They teach the market, the team, and the social circle what behavior invites consequence. People prefer to follow rules they understand and fear to break. That fear is a stabilizer, and stabilization is a precursor to predictable influence. Master the art of the tiny concession. A small, well-timed concession often secures a larger structural gain. Give them a trinket, and they will guard your interests like treasure. It is a paradox. Generosity practiced as strategy yields control. Do this with intention. Do not confuse generosity with surrender. Generosity as leverage is a tool. Generosity as an act of weakness is a liability. Your discipline will discern the difference. Your posture communicates before your words do. Posture is not mere physicality. It is history encoded in stance. When you hold yourself like someone who expects compliance, people audit your body for permission, and too often they find it. Train posture as rigorously as you train rhetoric. Your body must be a signal that others can read and surrender to without argument. Keep meticulous records. Memory is the enemy of deception. Documentation is the ally of consequence. A folder of dated notes, a trail of messages, a logged meeting minute. These are the invisible chechins that bind narratives. People who try to rewrite events will fail when the ledger exists. Your documentation is not petty, it is insurance. Use it to make allegations credible and to turn suspicion into actionable evidence. When the moment to act arrives, the dossier you prepared does the moral and logistic muscle and spares you from messy theatrics. Never underestimate the psychological weight of ritual. Rituals signal order. Order reduces anxiety in others, and anxiety is the enemy of decision-making. Provide rituals that comfort your allies and unsettle your opponents. A predictable cadence of updates and a ritualized method for approval make your domain legible. Legibility breeds control because people learn the sequence and then behave to conform to it. Calibrate who you forgive and who you do not. Forgiveness sends signals. It tells observers which behaviors you tolerate and which you do not. Use forgiveness as narrative. Forgive those whose continued usefulness outweighs their past infractions. Punish those whose presence risks structural rot. Your moral calculus will be pragmatic, presented as clarity, not cruelty. People respect clarity even when it harms them. You must become comfortable with being misunderstood. Those who cannot map your moves will attempt to simplify them into caricature. They will call you cold, merciless, or opportunistic because those words placate their discomfort with being outplayed. Let them caricature. Your work is to be effective, not liked. Teach people to expect your standards. When your expectations are non-negotiable, others adapt quickly or remove themselves. You're not obligated to court the participation of people who cannot meet your criteria. Let scarcity of standards do the filtering. It conserves your energy and sharpens your environment. Finally, cultivate a personal ritual of reflection that is not publicized. It'll be small, 5 minutes of exacting inventory at the end of each day, wins, losses, misreads, and micro-adjustments. That ledger is your private feedback loop. It is where you correct course and remove habits that cost leverage. Most people flinch at the mirror. You must embrace it. Self-scrutiny is how instinct improves. You are born speaking this language, but mastery comes from disciplined repetition. From here, you stop treating influence as performance and begin treating it like infrastructure. Every repetition is an axle that keeps the machine turning. Every small ritual is a rivet in a frame that will outlast temper and rumor. You practice the quiet things because the loud ones are easy to copy. You practice entry and exit as if they were treaties. How you arrive decides what they will offer. How you leave decides what they will owe. Your exits will be surgical. You will leave with intentions intact and with consequences already recorded. You tighten the circle with rituals that are so mundane they appear harmless. A weekly check-in that begins on time. A report with one sentence of clarity that ends with an explicit next step. An annual review that measures behavior as currency. These are your scaffolding. People begin to calibrate their schedules to your cadence, and calendars become your map. When everyone is operating to the same cadence, surprises are scarce, and you command the rare ones. You make your presence predictable in pattern, so that unpredictability becomes your tool, not your liability. You convert rumor into evidence by cultivating archive. Save the messages that show intent. Save the minutes that show hesitation. When you need to act, the archive does the moral weight and the logistical work for you. It is not petty to collect evidence. It is prudent. Evidence makes public narratives brittle and private decisions exact. When you release a document, the world does not need your interpretation. The document speaks with the authority of recorded fact. A released file can kill a campaign without theatrics, because recorded truth removes plausible fiction. Power tastes best when it is repeated with restraint. You cultivate appetite by resisting immediate consumption, offer influence like a rare commodity, allow others to hunger for it. Scarcity is not cruelty, it is calibration. When the hungry approach, they behave better than the comfortable. They bargain with more care. They value your terms. Their behavior becomes the mirror you use to decide who remains close and who is removed. When favor is scarce, loyalty becomes visible, and loyalty is a resource measured and deployed. Your vocabulary becomes a weapon because language structures reality. Choose words that force people to speak into categories you control. Name the problem with a phrase that irresistibly directs the conversation toward your solution. When they borrow your frame, they adopt your outcome. Practice the discipline of naming first. When controversy emerges, be the first to label it and the second to offer the narrowest remedy. People will accept the remedy because their only alternative is continued ambiguity and, worse, indecision. You understand that influence is fragile where trust is absent. Trust is not built by promises. It is built by predictable consequence. Keep your word in small things, so when you break precedent for strategic reasons, your break is legible. People forgive predictable exceptions more easily than erratic behavior. Make your deviations rare, announced, and justified by a principle that furthers your narrative. When you change course, explain it in a way that demonstrates utility, not vanity. Utility is the most persuasive moral argument. Surround yourself with a lattice of competence. Choose people who are better than you at the details you despise. The best lieutenants are those who can execute your vision without consulting your ego. Reward competence with authority and responsibility. Punishment is for betrayal, not for failure executed in good faith. Create an environment where honest error is tolerated if it occurs within the guardrails, and malice is not. This breeds initiative, and initiative is the multiplier of leverage. When you delegate, do so with clear boundaries and the expectation of rigorous reporting. When the opposition mobilizes, do not meet theatrics with theatrics. Convert their spectacle into procurement. Every public outburst provides data. Who shouted? Who stayed silent? Who shifted position? Use that data to reassign allegiances and to expose the quiet collaborators. Public fury can be an air filter. It separates opportunists from the sincere because only the insincere will escalate without plan. Label the opportunists and use their escalation as evidence of risk. Public opinion tends to punish the loud opportunist more than the quiet professional. Let your generosity be instrumental. When you grant access, attach expectations. When you invite someone into your circle, make the terms clear. Contribution first, entitlement later. People will respect the clarity. Transparency about expectation is not weakness. It is an efficiency multiplier. Mercy without conditions breeds entitlement. Mercy with terms creates reciprocity. Use generosity to teach structure. You will learn to love the ledger. Document every commitment you make, every concession you accept, and every deadline imposed. The ledger is not a weapon to shame. It is a map to enforceable promises. When someone reneges, you can point to dates and phrases and hold them to account with surgical precision. The ledger turns memory into a contract, and memory is the strongest defense against distortion. Make optics work for you. Optics are not theater, they are signals. A carefully timed photograph of inclusion will signal to an entire network that you value certain partnerships. A private note of thanks, archived and shown selectively, demonstrates your awareness of contribution. Use optics to signal standards, not to perform virtue. The performance that matters is the one that reshapes behavior. You will wield time as your ally. Deadlines compress decision-making and force choices. When you set a deadline, you dictate the tempo. People will react to the tempo more than the content, because tempo creates scarcity of attention. Use tempo to create leverage. A short window invites decisive actors. A long window invites procrastination and obfuscation. Choose tempo based on the type of behavior you want to incentivize. Do not underestimate the politics of absence. Presence answers questions. Absence creates them. Use absence to test dependency. When people complain about your unreachability, measure whether the complaint comes from genuine need or from entitlement. Absence reveals which relationships are performative and which are functional. Return strategically. When you return, ensure your presence advances the ledger and that it is not merely a consolation. Practice the discipline of ending conversations. Every interaction must close with a clear next step or a documented reason for pause. Vagueness compounds into inefficiency. Efficiency is the currency of influence. End with deadlines, owners, and deliverables. Teach others to expect closure, and they will deliver it because expectations shape behavior. Recognize that respect often arrives disguised as resentment. Those who most loudly inveigh against your methods frequently emulate them in private. Track imitation as a sign that your tactics have become benchmarks. When people copy you, you lose the element of surprise but gain cultural power. Cultural power is harder to oppose because it seeps into norms. Protect your advantage by constantly evolving trivial rituals. The content of your methods can be copied. The discipline that sustains them cannot. Cultivate humility as strategy. Public humility disarms critics, and private humility sharpens learning. Admit tactical errors when they are tactical. Fix structural errors when they are structural. Humility is not surrender, but a tool to gather intelligence. When you admit a mistake, you lower defenses and invite cooperation. Use admission as a vector to reframe relationships and to extract better information. Finality is a tool. When it is time to end a relationship, end it with clarity and without theatrical cruelty. A concise termination protects you from continued friction and communicates standard. The terminated will attempt to narrate the end. Let them. Your clarity will persist. The market prefers clean resolution to ongoing ambiguity. In the end, your native language of influence will look ordinary to those who lack fluency and terrifying to those who must answer to it. You will not require badges or degrees. You will require only practice and the discipline to apply it daily. Keep the rituals, keep the ledger, keep the cadence. Mastery is not a spectacle. It is a maintenance plan executed without drama. When the day comes for the final sequence, you will act not from vindication, but from procedural necessity. You will make the move to execute with the economy of a verdict. You will call one contact, schedule one meeting, sign one brief document, and the architecture you built will rearrange itself. There will be no need for spectacle because the infrastructure already dictates outcomes. Your opponents will discover that their options narrowed not by drama, but by consequence. You will observe with the calm of someone who understands timelines, and then you will press the final, quiet lever. That lever snaps agreements into place, reassigns resources, and concludes disputes. When the record closes, people will not remember theatrics. They will remember that things changed, and that you were the reason. That is the highest grade of authority. Keep practicing the small rituals until the architecture of consequence becomes the default.